And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you for joining us for a unique podcast community where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. And thank you so much for helping us grow. We hit 1,815 subscribers today, and we grow every day thanks to people like you. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. We love it when you like and share our videos as it helps our community grow. To see our over 260 past episodes, check out our website at www.jasontramm.net. Again, that's www.jasontramm.net. We have a wonderful guest today. We have Dariann Leigh, who is a rising superstar country singer. And she comes from a small town of Carlstadt, Minnesota, population 713. And she has a wildly growing country music career. She's been heard on The Boot, Country Rebel, CMT, and has singles out there. Most recently, her single Leave is out there and is lighting up the Spotify and the streaming markets. So check those out. So welcome to Dariann Leigh.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Nice to meet you. And how are things in Nashville today?
They're good. They're very good. It's been a lot of fun. Stepping into more gigging downtown, which is exciting.
So the gigging scene hasn't really stopped in Nashville. I think COVID probably stopped us all for a bit. But I think Nashville, we've had lots of Nashville artists on. I think it's opened sooner than most down there.
Oh yeah, I think it definitely slowed down for a little bit, but it's picked up, I think, full force at this point.
Well, that's great to hear because that's ground zero for all things country and also pop as well.
Very true. Very true.
So tell us about the journey from your small hometown to the big city of Nashville.
Yeah, I come from the small town of Carlston, Minnesota, like you were saying earlier, and there's no stoplights. There's one four-way stop. I graduated one of 14 students in my entire class.
Well, that's small. Wow.
Yeah, and typically you can't go anywhere here without being surrounded by at least like 400 people, it feels like sometimes. Like there's so many more people. But it's cool. It's been a huge journey, but to have the support of such a great area that I'm originally from is super important, and I've really appreciated it throughout my entire career because it's really been instrumental for everything that I've done.
Did you grow up in a musical family?
Semi-musical. That's probably not the answer you're expecting.
You know,
But
we've had so many artists on the show, and we get so many different answers. I'm more fascinated to see where people come from, and about half. You know, half come from
yeah.
musical rich families, some come from absolutely no musical background, and it's just fascinating to see who goes on to become an artist.
Right. My parents were in choir I have three older brothers. I'm the youngest of four. Um,
Minnesota's choral territory, my friend. That's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. It really is. They were all in choir. My eldest brother was actually super involved in theater and got me involved when I was literally in kindergarten. And so I kind of started out with theater and entered into music through that. But I honestly used music a lot learning growing up. Like even as young as spelling words and things like that. It was kind of my leaning post for all things in life. And it really just became more clear as I got older that that's what I wanted to do for a living.
And what's some of your first musical experiences? Did you sing in choirs in school and grow in that way?
Yeah, I sang in elementary, all throughout school and that, and as well as in church and things like that. I actually didn't join choir in high school until I was probably in like 10th grade, ninth or 10th grade. I was in band, I played percussion. And quite frankly, I wanted to study hall. So I didn't do choir for a while because I wanted to study hall.
Well, your choir teacher missed out on a good voice.
I was glad when I did join. I really enjoyed it.
It teaches you a lot. I'm a choir director at a university, and I also do the orchestra as well. But I just love the kind of the ears it builds and the training you have to go through. And it's a little different
Right.
as a soloist, but it gives you a lot of tools that you can use.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you take voice lessons as a high school student?
Yeah, I did. I started taking vocal lessons when I was in probably ninth grade, and I actually our school director did vocal lessons, so I worked with her on like school things. But I actually had somebody outside of school that I worked with for just like my performances and things like that. So it's cool to actually have a few different tastes of how you do things, whether it be breathing or whatever you're talking about. It's cool to have different takes on it and different descriptions about how you should do something.
And how about the guitar? Was that a natural part of your growth, or did that come later?
That was around the time that I started performing solo, actually. I knew people use like YouTube tracks and different instrumental tracks, and I liked it, but I liked being able to like control it all myself more. And so I actually started learning off of YouTube. And my parents heard me in my back room in my bedroom playing so much that my dad's like, we need to get her lessons. We need to just go get her lessons.
She's showing the interest. Get her in those
Right,
lessons. Yep.
right. So they signed me up, and it ended up being more jam sessions than truly too much lessons just because we had so much fun.
Well, it's nothing like being a songwriter and having that guitar to work with and to sit down. And
Absolutely.
when did you start writing songs?
I always say that I started writing songs before I realized what I was writing. It was always like long form poetry, and I thought it was just poetry until I realized that it was truly a song. And that was around the time when I was like 14 when I really started like actually putting things into the form of a song and putting things collectively in the way that I thought they should be.
When you write, does the words come first, or the melody come first, or the chords? How do you? What's your kind of system?
I'm a little bit of both. If I have an idea, I come up with a melody and I just kind of start ad-libbing words and things just kind of start falling into place.
I love that. It's kind of each song is so interesting how songwriters approach their craft, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
How have you? Did the poetry come easy? The lyrics come easy to you, or is it something that's taken time? Or
It was actually for me, I think because I'd written so much like long form poetry growing up, I kind of had a really good idea of how I was going to develop lyrics into words. And it was kind of like my diary entries. So for me, it was really natural to write music, and it's super natural to be vulnerable in music because that's the source that I used to be vulnerable growing up.
isn't that interesting? How everyone's kind of source and outlet to get their feelings and their emotions out winds up having an audience. What's it like when the songs that you write, go on your streaming services and get hit by thousands and thousands of people? What is it like when you get messages back?
It's wild. To put it quite simply, it is absolutely wild. It's so strange, but reassuring, but beautiful. But like, how did somebody else experience the same thing as me in a whole different way? And that's what I mean in strange, because it's like sometimes it's like we're all living the same variation of a very similar experience in life. And it's wild to think about somebody else having that same experience happening for them as well. But I've always said like the most beautiful thing about music is that all we want as humans, I think, is to feel validated in our emotions. And so when you hear a song that you relate to in whatever way that you relate to it in, it's super validating to know that somebody else experienced that too. So it's really a gift to be able to write music that people can relate to.
That's beautiful, and thanks for sharing that. I tell my students that music's all about universal human emotions, right? Just like you
Right.
said. And that's what opera is all about, and symphonies are all about, is taking those emotions and putting them in different guises. But deep down, there's only so many of those feelings that we feel. But it's amazing. I always find when you cross cultures and you wind up, I'm amazed by how country music gets hit all over the world. I mean, people really seem to like
Right.
country music in a lot of different places.
Yeah, it's music is powerful, right? It's we can all feel it and have our different tastes and different things, and maybe the way that I paint the portrait of the song is different than you view it, but it's still a variation of the same thing, and I think it's super magical.
That's also great about poetry is it's not so direct. I mean, when you say something, people apply it to their own situation, and it becomes maybe.
Right.
We had someone who was talking about a song they wrote for their brother, and it winds up being also could be a love song, and it just depends on how you
Right.
hear it, right?
Right. It's really interesting how that happens. And I actually really enjoy hearing how other people perceive the songs because I had one song that I thought was more about loss, and they were like, no, that's about a breakup. And I was like, along the same lines, and I respect it. I'm glad that you related to it in that way.
A lot of people I talk to don't like to be too specific because of that very reason. It gives them more flexibility, and it can be kind
Right.
of applied more. How has your songwriting changed over the years that you've been writing music?
I think as I've matured, my songwriting has matured. If I listen to my original EP and if people request for me to play my original EP, sometimes I cringe a little bit, but I appreciate that they like the music. But it's so funny to listen to that stuff from when I was so young because it's written from such a vulnerable place then, but now I look at it and I'm like, oh, you had so much more life. Like I was only like 18 when I was writing that. I'm 22 now, so not too much of a difference. But I already know in 4 years I'm gonna look back at myself right now and be like,
forget
oh,
it.
you had so much more.
I've got a 22-year-old son, and I'm 47. And every couple of years, you look back and say, "Man," the artistic journey just goes on, and like
Right.
as a conductor, I can, let's say I have Beethoven 5. I've conducted it like at least 8 times, but each time I was a different person, right? I've been through different parts of my life, and I know the music better. So every time I come back to it, it's like looking at a painting with a different angle. It's still
Right.
great art, but it kind of just slightly different every time I approach it. So it's really interesting.
It's humbling sometimes too.
I'm always fascinated with people like yourself who sing the same music. As you built a fan base, it must be interesting to sing. I tell my students that every piece of music is like an amber, like it's like captures what's going on in society around it. Like whether
Right.
it's social protest or a heartbreak, it kind of captures that and solidifies it. Do you ever feel like that when you're singing those songs?
A little bit, yeah. It's really cool to see how everybody kind of connects in that moment and what kind of stews up from whatever it is that you're singing, whether it be happy, sad, or sassy, whatever it might be.
Now, did you grow up with country music around the house?
Yeah, yeah. I would say country music was the predominant music in my family growing up. Lots of Johnny Cash, lots of Waylon Jennings, Dolly, you name it. And a lot of actually like Broadway music as well. So I feel like I kind of always had a mix of everything. My mom played Beethoven, my dad played Johnny Cash, my brother played Shania Twain. Like my other brothers were playing like Foo Fighters. It was quite literally everything. But I've really liked that growing up because it's made me like so much more aware of all different kinds of music and had an appreciation for that as well. But country music has always been kind of my home.
And when you started singing, songwriting, and starting writing music, was country music your natural expression?
Yeah, yeah, it really was. I don't even think it was necessarily even for me a choice that I had to make to go with country music. I think I was always just right there with country music.
Sometimes the glove fits right away, and it's.
Absolutely.
I'm fascinated though. You see so much kind of blending of styles and genres in country today. Um,
Right.
Tell me some of the artists who've influenced you.
Oh man. I mean, it goes back to his classics like Dolly and fast forward a little bit with Johnny and Glenn Campbell, like you name any of them, and I feel like there's always been somebody that's influenced something. I really love Shania Twain, like the ladies of now with Maren Morris, Carly Pierce. Those are some of my faves, but that list can go on and on and on.
Now that you've been doing a lot of performing, you've opened up for a lot of big, like really big acts. What's it like when you work with some of these people who are big stars in the field?
It's really cool. I always feel like I don't typically get too nervous when I perform because it's kind of some people might be terrified of it, but for me that's like my home. That's where I love to be is on the stage. It's where I'm the most comfortable, which sounds a little bit odd to some, but for me it's like no, that's my house.
When you got a job to do, it's a job. You have to kind of get yourself in that zone, get up there and deliver, right?
Exactly, exactly. And opening up for some of these artists has been so cool because you get to see how their craft is developed as well because you can see the music videos, you can hear the music, but when you see them in person you truly see the craft at I feel like its purest form. I opened up for Joe Nichols this past summer and he had signed my first guitar when I was 7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
It was a pink guitar that my parents gave me for Christmas. It was my first ever guitar. And so my mom was like, you're going to bring this with when you open for him because that's like a full circle moment and you got to let yourself have it. And so I met him and I told him about the story. We both agreed it's not a stage guitar anymore. It's definitely lived its life.
It's a prop guitar.
But it was super cool to be able to think about the 7 or 8 year old version of myself that saw him and was just starstruck and saw what I wanted to do in him. And then to be able to open up for somebody like him is really cool.
And tell us what it's like in Nashville. Like, and we've had so many of the singer-songwriters on the show and other artists in a few genres who are Nashville-based. And there's so many singer-songwriters and producers and great studio artists living there. It must be a vibrant scene. What's it like to perform there? What's it like to do you co-write, do a lot of co-writing?
Yeah, I'm co-writing every single week. Writing is something that I love to do. And the options here are endless to find talent to write with and even just to find friends that have a mutual love for what you love as well. Like you said, it's super vibrant in the artistry here and it's special.
So we were at, some of the artists were telling us about the singer-songwriters cooperatives. They get together like speed dating. You try writing. What's it like when you write with someone brand new? It's like, works, doesn't work. How do you know?
For me, I think it's always like the first ride is where you get to know them. The second ride is where you really get into the good stuff. And after that, it's when you're like, you're oiled ship. You've got the whole thing going, like everything's happening where it needs to happen. But that first write, I always feel like sometimes I wish I could experience the first write with somebody again, because it's so interesting how with art you just kind of end up flowing where you need to. It's not maybe designated, somebody will take this, someone will take that, but it all just ends up meshing exactly how it's supposed to. And I've never really experienced a room where I've been like, go, nobody, we are not really meshing here. There's definitely been times where I'm like, the song isn't the best, but I feel like we could mesh on a better song or something like that. But there's a lot of people out there that you can write music with, and it's super cool to be able to create music with other people that love it too.
That seems like a great place to do it. You have so many singer-songwriters in that area, and everyone's out there, and the producers. I mean, every time you perform, there must be like, it's always someone in the audience, right?
Oh yeah. So it's one of those situations where if you do something, somebody's like, oh yeah, she missed that B or the G or whatever. Like, that people know.
There's nothing like live performance. It really makes, that's like you said, our purest art is getting up there. And
Right.
I love doing recordings. I really enjoy that process. But for me, it's the live performance that the reason I'm a musician.
Right. And I feel like with live performances, you want to be as perfect as you can, but you can't make it perfect. It's going to be what it is there. And sometimes the imperfections make it perfect. Whereas with recording, like myself, I want it to be as crisp and perfect and clear, and everything has to be right on. But sometimes it's truly like in the natural that's the most perfect.
So how old were you when you first went to the studio?
Oh man, first went to the studio. I think all sorts of emotions, nervous, excited. I was obviously very green to the whole studio world and didn't necessarily know how things worked. It was very special though, because I had people there that were willing to kind of guide me and pick up where I left off and to help me out. And they really took it as an opportunity to educate me on what I was doing, not so much just to direct and tell me, but to truly like educate me on what I was doing. And I've grown to appreciate that even more since then, because that was when I was like 17 years old.
Sure.
And so I was able to learn so much in just a few weeks with these people that were able to kind of lay it down for me and let me know, like, this is what you do, this is what you don't do, la, 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 this, that. And I've really appreciated that sense.
What are some of the tips you can give to people who may be just starting out in the business? Or we have a lot of young people listen to the show. What can you tell people who are just starting out and give us some advice?
Yeah, just starting out, I was given the advice of picking up an instrument and never putting it down. And I think that's been huge for myself, especially with writing music. Like, my guitar is basically another part of me at this point. And I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. And I've always said that I think the first step is the hardest step, and every step after that just kind of aligns where it needs to. And if you can get yourself to take that first step, the rest of it will fall into place.
What's your axe of choice these days?
Ooh, what'd you say?
What's your instrument of choice?
Instrument of choice.
I said axe because I'm old.
I pictured axe like the like men's spray, and I was like, I'm confused.
The heavy metal guys would have gotten that joke.
Right. Still guitar for me. I played piano growing up. Was it percussion as well growing up as well. I haven't had much opportunity to pick up drumsticks since high school. More cajon stuff every now and again, but guitar is kind of my extra part of me.
And what's your favorite brand of guitar?
I've got a Taylor sitting next to me, and I think that
they are so beautiful.
Taylor. They're so good. My dream, though, is to fall in with an old Martin. Just like an old, like, it's built up its great sound. That's my dream one day.
One of my buddies is a luthier, and we were just talking about this. He's a master instrument repairman guy, and he's great at basses and guitars and other things too. But he goes to like these swap meets, and he saw a Martin guitar. It was like a really old one too, and they were asking, and the guy didn't know what it was, and he's like, "How much for it?" He's like, $50. He's like, "Okay, 50." It needed a lot of work, but he said I turned it around for like 2,000.
Right, it's crazy.
They're great instruments.
They're great, and I don't know. There's something about an aged guitar that is just so beautiful.
You're talking to an orchestra conductor. My concertmaster has 6 rare violins, including a Stradivarius from 1780.
Wow.
Probably worth $5 million.
That's incredible.
And you think like, well, wood makes sense. That over time, the overtones get more rich. With a
Right.
brass instrument, they break down in 75 years. They don't last long.
Right.
But the wood, if it's properly maintained and lacquered and taken care of and controlled, can last a very long time.
Oh yeah, I think it's cool, especially like I have friends who have guitars that their parents had or their grandparents had, and it's such a beautiful sound, and it's sometimes underestimated. I feel like you see the new shiny guitar and you're, I need it, but those old ones sound so great.
I'm going to have a podcast coming up in New York City with one of New York City's top, violin repairmen, and he also makes modern ones that are like $60,000 a pop. And like we're going to have two virtuosos. We're going to have one like famous violinist play old and new, and see if people can identify which is which.
That's cool.
Because
I like that.
the collectors and all the famous soloists want to have Stradivarius from the 1700s, but a lot of times, if even a blind listening test, they're not going to tell the difference.
Right. That's crazy.
Prove me wrong, but
I think it's cool. I think it's cool.
anyway, it's pretty amazing. The instrument is an extension of ourselves. What is it about Taylor's that grabs you?
For me, actually, the guy that I took guitar lessons from is a total Gibson lover, and Fender. And so he was selling me on that. And I think also when you're picking out a guitar, you have to listen to the tone of the guitar and how it meshes with the tone of your voice as well. And I was at my grandparents have a lake house. I was at their lake house, and there's a music store nearby, and I'm always game to go to a music store. I'm always game to walk around and see what's happening, play a few guitars, whatever it might be. And there was this one guitar, and it just felt right. I picked it up, and the way that it sounded with my voice, even my dad, who he appreciates music and he can tell a lot about sound. He's the guy that runs my sound when I play shows back home. But even my dad, for instrumental, he could even tell that it was something that my tone matched so well with.
Is it a new guitar or something that's been played before?
No, that was a new guitar.
Brand new.
Yeah.
Something special about that too.
Yeah. It was almost like it was meant to be. I think it is.
Well, but it's beautiful. Would you like to play us a song?
Yeah, I can do that. Absolutely.
And tell us about the song and give us a little bit of information on some of the backstory. We love that.
Yeah, so I wrote the song with Charlie Reynolds and Cameron Palmer over Zoom, actually, in the beginning of the pandemic, where everybody's lives went much more virtual than they were before. And we ended up talking about the people that come into your lives and the places that they fall into, whether it be relationships or friendships, anything that it might be for you, and the way that your self shifts into theirs. Like you can become one, whether it's a friendship, like you shape each other's opinions, the way that you do things, you start to see eye to eye, right? And how another person's perspective can shift yours as well, and how that feels when that person leaves and what you're left with. Because maybe they describe the color yellow in the most beautiful way, and now you can't think of it any other way, right? It's called Leave. It goes like this. You were always trying to change me, mix it up and rearrange me. I'm not one to let the rules bend. Then I started playing pretend, followed your steps to the moon, and now how do I get back to solid ground? When you look in the mirror, tell me, do you see her? You can't make me different and just leave. You got what you wanted out of me. Tell me, was it worth it? You left me deserted, praying on my knees, trying to find me. That you're burning every bridge that you meet. In the kitchen, red wine. Now I just get lost in the neon lights. I don't touch what reminds me of, but you convinced me to love. Followed your just leave and just leave. You got what you wanted out of me, out of me. Tell me, was it worth it? You left me deserted, paying all my knees trying to find me. Did you burn every bridge that you made? You look in the mirror, tell me, do you see her? 'Cause I don't. You can't make me different and just leave. You got what you wanted out of me, out of me. Yeah, tell me, was it worth it? You left me deserted, paying all my knees trying to find me. Did you burn every bridge that you made? Then you'll leave. Then you'll leave. There we go.
Thank you so much. I just love to hear
Thank
people
you.
perform live on the show, and it really means a lot to share your talent and your gifts with us. When did you make the move to Nashville? What was it like getting there at first?
Yeah, I traveled back and forth to Nashville for about 4 years before I finally moved. Meaning I basically stayed here for like months at a time. But I finally made the move actually this previous November. So still a new resident officially of Nashville, but very familiar.
That's wonderful, and there's no better place to be for a singer-songwriter, and for especially going into the country field, right? I mean, you're around all the producers, and
Right.
do you have a particular producer you work with regularly?
Yeah, I've been working with Butter Fortney of originally from Trailer Choir, actually. He worked with Toby Keith quite a bit, and my music kind of landed in his ear. And ever since then, we've just been making music, and every single time, it's such an incredible process. And it's so cool to see music from where it begins and to where it ends up in the hands of people's phones, CDs, whatever it might be.
I'm always fascinated by that journey and how it changes too. Like a lot of
Right.
people come on and like what you start with is so different than the ending process. What is it like when working with a producer, and how long have you worked with this guy?
Yeah, I've been working with Butter for 2 years now, I think, actually. We started out working on my single Wherever I Go, written actually by his wife, Emily, as well as Guy Clare. They wrote that song for me, which is so
Wow.
crazy to say. Yeah, they saw my life and they said, we know how to make a song about this girl. And they did. It's so fun. And we've been working together since then. And the art process is just so pure. And he allows me to have the time to think about things a little bit too, because I'm one of those that like I can hear it once in a great moment, but my favorite time to hear it is like sitting in my car and just driving around. Middle of nowhere. It doesn't have to be very ambitious. I don't have to be going to get groceries, whatever it might be. Just to sit in my car and hear it in my car, but also like put it in the midst of other people's songs that I love and to kind of see where I think it fits in. And he gets it. He gets that I need a little bit of time here and there to create the right thing. It's cool.
And the choice of instruments and kind of like some of those production choices, it must be really fun. How long did it take to record some of those singles? Tell us, those two singles, the one you just performed has 45,000 listens on Spotify, and the one that you mentioned before has 145. I was just on your account, and that's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. Leave was actually a bit longer of a process, the longest process I've had so far, but I would say anything during COVID times has been very different, right?
For everyone in every part of the music industry.
Absolutely. I tend to work a little bit ahead on music. I know sometimes music in today's world, especially with things like TikTok, it's made immediately. I actually typically work about a year in advance.
Wow.
So for me, actually, Leave, I recorded originally 2 years ago. And then I re-recorded this previous summer. I re-recorded all vocals just because I felt like there's more to be said in my vocals, and I'm, again, a little bit of a perfectionist, so I wanted it to be where I wanted it to be, and we created it then, and instrumentally, that all comes together with very little bit of time. You send them your demo, and quite honestly, you watch a song be born right in front of your eyes. They hear it through once, and they're all like, we have our ideas, we know exactly what to do. They go into the room and they play it, and I'm just jaw dropped the entire time.
How much latitude do you give the players when they come in?
I let them do whatever.
That's awesome.
I feel like people work the best when they're allowed to do whatever they want to do, especially artistically. Like, to inhibit someone's art, to me, I feel like is such a disservice to their art and their capability. And so they know full well that when I come in, no holds barred, do whatever you think is right. If you want to redo something 18 times, you redo it however many times you need to, because I just want to hear what you're able to create. And it's so weird because most of the time I don't even explain what I want. Like, I hear it in my head and they start doing something. Like, Lee was straight off the first lick. His name was Smith Curry. Right away, he hit, and I was like, oh, yep, he knows exactly everything that I painted in my head and I'm hearing in my brain right now. He just made it happen right there. And I didn't tell him at all. They're all so incredible.
That's the alchemy in the studio with these great studio players that they bring to the table after so much experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a gift to watch, truly.
I should have. I grew up with some studio musicians. I should have them on the show because everyone knows the singer-songwriters and the performers, but some of those guys are the unsung heroes of the business.
Absolutely, and they've worked with so many people. So many people.
Do you work with the same musicians regularly, or do you mix it up?
Actually, in the past 4 singles, I've been working with the same few, or
That's
5
great.
at this point now. Maybe even more than that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. The past 7 have
That's a
been
lot.
with the same few. Yeah, I didn't even realize there's that many. You just epiphany moment did me.
When you go on the road, do you play by yourself, or do you open up with a band?
I do a little bit of both. I started out solo acoustic, and so doing that feels like home for me. That's what I grew up doing. But band work is some of my favorite because it allows me to be a little bit more free artistically and to kind of have other people come in and sprinkle their talents here and there. So I appreciate both.
Excellent. So COVID came and it kind of derailed all the live performing for a while, and for us it was 2 years in my field. It was crazy, and
Right.
but it was a great chance for us to think in other ways and to be creative. What are some ways that you learned about yourself during that time?
Oh man, I was at my parents' house and I learned that I'm very good at getting a lot of house projects and yard projects and home projects done really quickly, to the point that I regretted how quickly I did them because I had nothing else to do.
I did the
But
same thing. I have 4 kids, and we were in the backyard working on the backyard, and kind of just like, I was supposed to be conducting in Europe and working all over the place, and all that got shelved. So I was like, okay, now I
right.
guess we'll. So we started a podcast, and that's where we are right now.
I love it. I love it. It's so cool to see what developed when we were allowed to give ourselves the time to have peace in our moment too. Although it was forced, and we weren't necessarily expecting it, I think sometimes having that time is a gift too. And although it has been really hard for many people, I've treasured it as much as I can.
How does that manifest in your songwriting?
Songwriting also went completely over Zoom, which made it very interesting. I found myself writing a lot more with myself, me, myself, and I. But that's how I
Good
started
team.
writing. Yeah, right. We argue with each other sometimes, but at the end we get a song, right? No, it's cool. And I thought it was really nice to be able to kind of hone in and see where I maybe needed to work on my writing as well, and to point out spots within myself that I knew I was maybe weaker and could strengthen, because we had so much time to strengthen those things, and really honestly landed in live streams a lot. That was my audience for that entire time. I did like 4 or 5 lives a week.
Did you really?
Yeah,
Wow.
it was a lot.
That is a lot. 4 or 5 live streams a week. Did you play like a 1 song, 2 song sets? What did you do?
There was times where I would play for hours on end, and it was just because people were there wanting it, and I was wanting it just as badly as them. And I think we were also desperate for some sort of human interaction at that time, that I was cool playing any song as many times as somebody might want. It gave me something to do. Truthfully, it also gave me something to live for some days, because when you're an artist and you're not allowed to be out in front of people, you feel like you've kind of lost the purpose of being an artist, which is being in front of others.
You're preaching to the choir for sure. And
Absolutely.
I did 100 virtual choir and orchestra projects. People record by themselves and send them in, and we mix them together. And I mean, while that kept my communities solvent and intact, it's not the same thing in any stretch of the
Absolutely
imagination.
not.
Just like when you end a Zoom song and you don't hear any applause, people are maybe commenting and chatting, but it's not the same.
Yeah, I realized that there's a lot of words I ended up repeating. I'd be like, and there we go, and I just move on to the next thing.
But in some ways, that's all we had to work with, and we make it work too. And I'm sure people got a lot out of your singing is so expressive. Hearing you sing your song, I mean, just has expression always been something that was easy for you?
Yeah. And oh my gosh, when I was a kid, I was known as the kid that would read storybooks extremely dramatically, which, knowing that I grew up in theater, shouldn't be too shocking. But to the point where I remember my teachers would just watch and would just laugh because I would and then the frog jumped and it was crazy, and all of these things. If I could make a book theatrical, that was my jam.
Born theater person. I love that.
Yeah. Bless everybody's hearts for not being oh, that girl's annoying. We need her to calm down a little bit. They let me do what I wanted. They let me be as dramatic reading Dr. Seuss as you could possibly be.
Well, pays off big time when you're on the stage, and you got to make people excited and build interest in a set. And what's your next performance coming up?
Actually, next performance coming up is I have 2 next week at Luke's 32 Bridge, downtown Broadway. So those will be fun on Monday and Tuesday, and then this summer at my hometown in Carlston, we were talking about earlier, opening up for Big and Rich. Then I'm also opening up for Craig Morgan the following weekend. So I'm really looking forward to those. It'll be a lot of fun.
Do you have any singles coming out or any other recording projects on the way?
There may or may not be a music video for Leave coming very, very, very soon. And then I have 2 other singles coming up. The one is very ode to 2000s country, which is kind of my favorite. And the other one's an ode to my hometown. So they're both pretty special to me.
And when can we expect those to come out?
The next one will be shortly in the next couple months. It's called Blame It On Me. That one will be very soon. The other one is called Jackson, and that will be closer to the fall.
Okay. Make sure you're on the lookout for those. And how can people find out more about you and your music?
Yeah, you can find me on every social media, and I mean every single one, at Dariann Leigh, or you can go to my website, dariannleigh.com, and that will lead you to tour dates, merchandise, where you can contact me, anything you want, streaming, socials, all Dariann Leigh things are right there for you.
I want to point out to the listeners, make sure you support indie artists you like, because it is so much work and so much, there's so much that the indie artists have to do these days, and nothing like supportive fans who support their artists. And I encourage you to check out this fantastic singer and who's going to do some great things.
Thank you so much.
Dariann, all the best. Thank you so much for joining us in Music Matters, and continued success.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. Make sure you check us out on our social media platforms. We're not on TikTok. We're on all the rest of them. And thank you for joining us tonight. Remember, keep music alive.